Okay, welcome to Authors Night. We have a very different way we're doing Authors Night this year. We're thrilled to be having authors on private discussions in very intimate groups. Used to be 2,500 guests meeting 100 authors, and it wasn't quite intimate. This we think is intimate. Rather than going to one dinner party, you've gotten a chance to meet many different authors and hear their stories. And lucky now, you have Dr. Ruth Westheimer as our author. I'm thrilled to be introducing and hosting her. Dr. Ruth Westheimer is best known for having pioneered talking explicitly about sex on radio and television. But that is only a small part of her rich and diversified life. Born in Germany in 1928, Dr. Westheimer was sent to Switzerland at the age of 10 to escape the Holocaust, which wiped out her entire immediate family. At the age of 17, she went to then Palestine, where she joined the Haganah, the Israeli freedom fighters, was trained to be a sniper, and was seriously wounded in a bomb blast. She later moved to Paris to study at the Sorbonne, and in 1956 came to the US, where she obtained her master's degree in sociology from the graduate faculty of the New School of Social Research, and her doctorate of education in the interdisciplinary study of the family from Columbia University Teachers College. She is the author of 46 books. A new edition of Heavenly Sex, Sexuality in the Jewish Tradition is about to come out. She is still teaching, of course, and will soon be receiving an honorary doctorate from Ben Gurion University in the Negev. She can be found on Twitter at Ask Dr. Ruth, where she has nearly 100,000 followers. Dr. Westheimer, a widow, has 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and resides in New York City. I'm so honored she is our speaker. She will be interviewed by the executive director of the East Hampton Library, Dennis Fabiszak. Dennis?
Thank you very much, Patti.
Dennis, hold it. She forgot to say that I have the best 4 grandchildren in the world, that I have the best daughter, Miriam, who makes it possible that I can talk to you. Now you talk.
Thank you. Let's say a little bit more of that. Dr. Ruth didn't have any power, so Miriam found a store, and Dr. Ruth is sitting in the attic of the store so she could be online today.
Only for you, Dennis.
And she turned off the air conditioning so she could hear us. So
right.
We're hoping it doesn't get too warm in there. Okay, Heavenly Sex, and which sexuality in the Jewish tradition first came out in 1995, but it's been made an evergreen book by NYU Press. And it's
I like the way you say that, evergreen. It's a classic that will never be out of print. So it's not like many other professors that write a book and then you can't find it. Mine is going to be there forever and ever.
That's right. And Sex for Dummies also came out in 1995, and it just came out with a 4th edition. Why do you think your books have such a long life?
First of all, because everybody, including you, Dennis, I know that about you, everybody's interested in that subject matter that I am supposed to be an expert in. So the Sex for Dummies, people called me, I didn't even call them, and they said, write another chapter or 2. I'll say something about that in a moment. The same thing with Heavenly Sex, Sexuality in the Jewish Tradition. NYU Press called, and they said, your book will be a classic. It'll be like always available. I am jumping for joy. The Sex for Dummies, when they asked me to do a 4th edition, I said yes, and very interesting. Before that, miserable virus, I said I want to add something about loneliness, not only widows like me, but loneliness in terms of also young people who can't make that decision to hook up with somebody like you do, Dennis. So I said I will do it, and I did it with Pierre. I talk and Pierre writes. For me, that I'm still, now I am an endangered species. I'm 92, and because of that stupid virus, my daughter doesn't let me socialize. I haven't been in a restaurant for 4 months. It doesn't matter. I'm listening. I'm very disciplined. I'm very obedient. And I'm delighted to talk with you. But next year, Dennis,
Yeah.
I will find another book or something to talk about. And Patti Kenner, don't answer, but next year I'm coming to your house for dinner. So I'm glad that you are doing this with Zoom, because I know that what we are talking about is going to have another life, and you will explain to them where.
Yes. With Heavenly Sex, I know you made some editing changes to it. What exactly did you change from the original version?
Okay, there are some things that I did it with Jonathan Mark. Jonathan Mark is a writer with the Jewish Week, and I got him now to do a few changes, not drastic changes, but for example, I say in the Jewish tradition, first of all, that I can talk so openly about sex is because I'm so Jewish. In the Jewish tradition, sex has never been a sin. It always has been a mitzvah, which means an obligation between a husband and a wife. But there were some things that many years ago I did not know so much about. For example, homosexuality. In the Jewish Bible, there is a sentence that is very problematic for all of us. So I changed a little bit, nothing drastic, but I did say we do not know the etiology, the reason for homosexuality. Even today, we do not know. However, from the beginning, I always said respect for anybody is not debatable. So I made such things a little bit clearer, because we still don't know the etiology, but we do know, and I want people, even in the Hamptons, Dennis, to respect people of different persuasion. So I'm very delighted there is on the cover a marriage contract. And I very often say that because the sages were the best sex therapists. When I reread now the new edition, I have to tell you that it's the most beautiful sex manual that has ever been written. For example, it tells a husband and a wife to engage in sex on Friday night. There's a prayer that says the husband, Dennis, even so you are not Jewish, you can use it Friday night. The husband has to say to his wife, there are many wonderful women out there, but you are the very best one. And in the entire vocabulary of sexuality, there is no better sexually arousing sentence than for you to say to your partner, you are the very best. So when I reread and changed a little bit, I was very happy that the sages knew how important it is.
What do you
I see
think?
you laughing. Tell everybody that you're laughing. I like that.
You promised me you wouldn't embarrass me too much.
I'm never asking a personal question, but I do like your beard.
Thank you.
Tell everybody.
So does my girlfriend. That's why I still have it. What do you think non-Jews would get from reading Heavenly Sex?
They would understand Ruth Westheimer better. They would understand that so many years ago, when I was trained to be a sex therapist by Dr. Helen Singer Kaplan at Cornell Medical Center, they would understand a little bit why I was never embarrassed. Now, In the Jewish tradition, it only talks about married people. I changed that a little bit. Even people in a relationship, Dennis, it's okay to read that book and to learn what the sages have said. For example, it says in there that the sages said a man, a husband, or a boyfriend, it doesn't say a boyfriend, I'm adding that, can do with his wife as he pleases, even from behind. From behind is not anal intercourse. From behind means inserting the penis into the vagina from behind, which is wonderful because it leaves the clitoris to be stimulated to an orgasmic response. So I can take all of these things in the Jewish tradition and I can explain that those sages were wonderful sex therapists. I'm sure you're going to read that book tonight.
Yeah.
I see you laughing.
Your book, Sex for Dummies, you mentioned that you made some changes for young people today. Can you talk a little bit more about the updates you made in the 4th edition?
Yeah, I tell you that some of the changes, and when we did it with Pierre Leroux, with whom I've done so many of my books, I talked about loneliness not only for widows like me, but for people who just can't make that commitment. So as in Manhattan and in East Hampton, they go out, they find each other attractive and interesting, but that's different from taking the step to say, let's go steady and be exclusive, and hopefully we get married and have children. I'm very old-fashioned. I want everybody, it says in the Bible, not good for men to be alone. And that's what I'm after. On the other hand, in that book, Dennis, I also realize we live in a different world and there are more choices today, but there are also, because of television and because of other media, the expectations become much higher. And that's why I'm saying be realistic and hopefully do find somebody with whom you can have that relationship. That means when you come home, somebody is there with a big smile saying, I'm glad you are home. So in that Sex for Dummies, in that 4th edition, I do explain a little bit more about finding a partner. And that holds true for homosexuals. And here I have to say again, in the Sex for Dummies, how I emphasize that respect is not debatable. I don't talk much about Me Too. I'm not an expert, but I know about it. I don't talk much about what is called a they, somebody that even I don't know if it's a man or a woman. And I'm a very honest therapist by saying, I don't know. I'll check it out, but I don't know. So it's worthwhile to get the book.
It sounds like Sex for Dummies is probably a good book to give to young people.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, what do you think is the appropriate age for somebody to start reading a book like that?
There might be young people at the age of 19, 20 who are mature. And it's very interesting. In the Jewish tradition, and I talk about that too, it says a lesson taught with humor is a lesson retained. So I could never tell you a joke. Most jokes that you people tell me, I don't get. But I know that if you teach with humor, people will remember what you said. It also says in the Jewish tradition that if you teach with humor, the students will remember what you said. So I try to do that, and that's why I can still teach Columbia and Hunter. And that's why I come to East Hampton and do the book fair and then have dinner at Patti Kenner next year.
speaking about young people, a lot of them are using apps for dating and for meeting people, some just meeting for sex. What do you think of apps like Tinder and some
First of
other?
all, Dennis, meeting for sex, big problem. I
Mhm.
don't want to see a rise in sexually transmitted diseases or in AIDS. However, I want everybody to use the apps, but to use them intelligently, to know not to ever meet in a secluded place. Meet at the East Hampton Library, meet at a hotel in a lobby, meet someplace public, so that when you do meet and that person is not what they had written about on that app, you are not going to be so disappointed. And if you do meet somebody that doesn't fulfill your expectations, you suddenly develop a headache and you go home.
Mm.
But never to meet in a secluded place. On the other hand, any of these matchmaking apps, I'm all for it. But we have to teach people, and you at the East Hampton Library can help with that. You can help by saying, come to the library, pick out a book, you don't even have to buy it, sit someplace, find somebody that looks nice, and start a conversation. The other day I said that lonely people today, young and old, should, as of today, take a list, 5 new people that you have not had regular conversation with to call, but find a topic of conversation. For example, say I listened to Dennis and Patti and Ruth talk today. Did you hear it or did you listen to it? If not, get it later. Find a topic of conversation so that when you do talk, it's not boring. For example, don't ever call me with a recipe. I'm not interested. I just want you to feed me for dinner, Patti Kenner, but I don't want to hear anything about recipes. So call, as of tonight, 5 people in East Hampton, in Southampton, in all of your Hampton things, and find a topic of conversation. Belong to a book club. Say this virus has taught us how important it is to take the initiative to make a connection and to talk to each other, because it makes me very worried. There are some people who all day long have nobody to talk to.
That's a really interesting point, and something you might not know is during the pandemic, the library staff were actually assigned phone numbers, and we made phone calls to everybody with a library card that was 60 years or older.
Fantastic.
And it was just to ask them how they were doing, not to ask for a donation or anything like that, just to reach out and say, we're still here, we're thinking about you. Is there anything we can do for you? And I think those phone calls, not only were they wonderful for the residents, but they also were wonderful for the staff
Yes,
in the response that they got from the residents and
I
just
bet you that
connecting
most,
with people when they were at home.
I bet you, Steve, that most people said thank you for calling,
Mm.
and I bet you they will never forget
Yeah,
that in this very difficult, miserable times, you people reached out.
yeah.
So that's great. I cannot say everybody will get good sex because I don't know if they have partners, but I can tell you, because I know about you, that you and the staff members who have partners, that should give them a smile and good sex by having done that. That's very wonderful.
So talking about the pandemic, it's caused a lot of problems. One of them being loneliness for a lot of people. Do you have any advice on how to handle this?
Yes, first of all, to admit I'm very lonely to themselves. And then to say that the East Hampton Library, Dr. Rose said, do something about it. It is not enough to say, I'm lonely, I'm lonely. You can't make a conversation out of that. Make sure you read a book, maybe one that you haven't looked at in 20 years, and then make some notes, and then say, yes, I am lonely, but I'm going to do something about it. I will call somebody and start a conversation. And then they can say, next, as soon as the library opens, let's meet at the library. Do you have coffee at the library?
We do.
Okay, so let them say, let's meet at the East Hampton Library, not just for giving them money, that's nice too, but for having a cup of coffee and a conversation, because some of your people know how to suggest what to read. Somebody can come in and say, okay, what do you suggest? I read, I'm very interested in whatever, stories from other countries. I'm interested in mythology. I'm interested in stories about France or Italy or trips that I can't take now. And your staff, I'm sure, is knowledgeable of what to choose.
Great. So we talked about the books you've written for adults, and there's many of them, but you're also a very accomplished children's book author.
Right.
You have a children's book called Rollercoaster Grandma. Do you want to tell us
I'll tell you why
about
I'm laughing. Because as we speak, the book Rollercoaster Grandma is a book for junior high schools. Tell your librarians. It talks about my childhood. It talks about my father being taken by the Nazis. But it also, and my becoming an orphan, but it also uses humor. It talks about, I have to laugh myself, my taking 2 of my 4 grandchildren to a country fair. We want to go on a ride. We get measured. They can go on a ride and I'm too short. And lo and behold, Patti Kenner, listen carefully, and Dennis, as we speak, a few days ago, there is a brand new animated film for children. It's being not sold, but shipped and chaperoned by the Shoah Foundation, Steven Spielberg. And the film is called, Miriam, the film is called,
Oh, I have it. It's Ruth, A Little Girl's Big Journey.
say it again.
Ruth, A Little Girl's Big Journey.
It is fantastic. First, I was worried because part of the animation is from the documentary about me as Dr. Ruth. I thought the animation, they're going to make me look like Pinocchio. They're going to make me look like Mickey Mouse. Actually, the animation was wonderful because it gave me many points of talking. For example, about loneliness, I'll say something about that. Now they took that animation, they added 10 more minutes, and I now have a film for junior high schools. And I promise you, Dennis, you're going to get it for your library. And it is beautiful. Don't tell anybody. I wouldn't be surprised if we might get an Academy nomination.
Wow.
For that film for children. Now I tell you why it is so beautiful. I don't talk about the horrors of the Holocaust. There are other books about that. But I do talk about my being an orphan. I show in that animation how I'm waving goodbye to my father when the Nazis picked him up, and how he turned around and waved to me despite the fact that he must have been horrified being picked up. And then also on the railroad to go to Switzerland, if I hadn't been on that train, I wouldn't be alive. My mother and grandmother came to the Frankfurt railroad station and they waved goodbye. And the animators were brilliant. They showed the railroad station as if they were the only people there waving goodbye. Not so. There were 300 children with me on that train being sent to safety from Germany, from Nazi Germany to Switzerland. If I hadn't been on that train, I wouldn't be alive. So it gives me something to talk about, and I can visually see it. Also, they were brilliant. The color of the railroad station is like a pink. And this really implies such loneliness that you, Dennis, tomorrow, not tonight, you're too busy. Tomorrow, go and get and watch that film.
I will.
So what I did with children's films, I also did now a book called Crocodile, You're Beautiful, about diversity. Because I believe that a little aunt should be happy to be an aunt. If they cooperate with other aunts, they can build bridges. Then I did a book to show something about what do I'm looking for the word? It's called Leopold the turtle, because a turtle, if it doesn't stick its neck out to take a risk, doesn't move. However, careful these days. These days, with that horrible virus, nobody should take a risk. So that's a different story, but it's for small children to be able to say, you have to take a risk, not to be shy, to talk to some other child. So the children books that I do have that message, diversity, not to be shy, and then the brand new one of my voyage, a long voyage, which many people do know, took me Germany, Switzerland, Palestine, that became Israel, France, to the United States, and then I liked it and I stayed. I stayed in order to do the East Hampton Library fundraiser, but we don't do a fundraiser today. But if people, Dennis, want to send you a little money, after I get off, tell them how to do it.
Okay, I will. So just like we're not under the tent today, we're on Zoom, and a lot of things are being done on Zoom. If you were just starting out as a sex therapist today and you couldn't meet people to counsel them directly and you had to do it on Zoom, how do you think that would change things? Would it make it harder, easier? Or maybe you're still counseling people now?
No, I don't counsel people anymore, because I believe that at the age of 92, let young people be the therapists. However, I talk a lot on television and now with you on Zoom. And I would say, if a relationship is a good one, Dennis, then if there is a sexual problem about her not achieving orgasm, about him being a premature ejaculator, all kinds of sexual problems, if the relationship is a good one, I believe you can help. If the relationship is not a good one, then this will not help. But I think that for people, especially if they just need a little bit of help, if they, for example, have to hear somebody like me, I'm not the only one, say loud and clear there's no such thing as a G-spot, that was like a book written, and I had women come to my office thinking they're not normal because they can't find the G-spot. Loud and clear for the East Hampton Library, no such thing as a G-spot. Some people are more sensitive inside the vagina than others, but no G-spot. The other thing that's important, Sigmund Freud, Dennis, should have taken a lesson from me, because Freud did us women a tremendous disservice. He said, any woman who needs clitoral stimulation in order to achieve sexual satisfaction is an immature woman. Sigmund Freud did a terrible disservice to women, because I used to have women asking in my office, what can they do? They don't have a vaginal orgasm. So Dennis, what I would say today to young sex therapists, you are so fortunate. You have people like Dr. Helen Singer-Kaplan, you have a Dr. Ruth, you have people who write books, other people too. Make sure you give that good information. Make sure you don't be embarrassed because you're well trained. Here, the East Hampton Library, that fancy place, is inviting me, and I talk about orgasm and erection, and I talk about premature ejaculation, and so many things that by talking about it helps people. And Dennis,
Yes.
whoever is being helped by this talk, money for your East Hampton Library.
You are the hardest working author we know. We're now going to take some questions
Yes.
from the audience. The best way would be if you could type your question on the chat window and I'll read it out.
Yeah, read it for me, loud.
Let's see.
And if it's about sex, read it with a smile.
Don't
And
embarrass
don't
me
tell
too
me
much
about
with
your
the
sex
questions you
life.
ask. Dr. Ruth, while we're waiting for a question, do you want to mention your Hulu?
Yes,
Hulu?
mention Hulu.
Yeah.
On Hulu, the film, and people really love it, and I love it. And it's now being shown in 19 cities in Germany. The film is called Ask Dr. Ruth, and you can get it on Hulu. And it was very successful. And Patti Kenner was at the opening. And I love the film. And now I do a lot of interviews in German for Germany.
Mhm.
And because it's being shown there. In terms of my story that you just heard, it is interesting that here I am at the age of 92, and the film is super successful in all of Germany. Nice.
Yeah. Lenore wants me to unmute her. We can try, but it's difficult for Dr. Ruth to hear the questions on her speaker, so it would be easier if you type it. I have a question for you. You talked about people being lonely during the pandemic.
Yes.
There are a lot of couples, including couples with children, that are having a different problem in the pandemic where they've been stuck at home with the children there 24 hours a day,
Right.
with no school, no work outside of the home, and they're facing a different situation where
Right.
they're together all the time, but maybe not romantic because
I
they're
would never I would never comment of should schools be open. We have to ask the health professionals. However, very difficult to be stuck at home. On the one hand, I hear from some people, we have never talked as much with our children as now during this pandemic. So I hear that a lot. We have never just heard it from people, not Americans, that this is the first time that they really sat down and had lots of conversation, or like Patti does with her grandsons, watch movies. However, we have to admit that in order to keep a sex life alive, this is very difficult, because to be with little children for the whole day is very tiresome. So what we have to tell parents then is not to lose hope. This will be over eventually, and we are going to have again super good sex. And if they need some help, they'll call you, Dennis, and you call me. But to admit that it's difficult. But I will not get on the discussion about schools, because there are so many components to that,
Yeah.
that it has to be the health professional. However, I tell you something personally for me. Since I'm 92 years old, since I belong to the endangered species, I'm waiting for Governor Cuomo to come on and say, Dr. Ruth, now you can go out. Until he says that, I listen to my daughter. That has never happened before, so much that I'm not seeing anybody except her driving me to your Zoom.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. Lenore says, Dr. Ruth, you're such an amazing fountain of creativity, and you have so many interesting new ideas and projects. I want to know, where do you get your inspiration, and what motivates you and inspires you?
Okay, so first of all, I tell you something on a serious note. Part of my inspiration and drive, and maybe a little bit uptightness of getting to your Zoom on time. But part of it has to do that I'm an orphan of the Holocaust. I was 10 years old when I was sent to Switzerland, and then my parents and the whole family did not make it. I knew one thing, that I had, and there were 1.5 million Jewish children. It wasn't just Jewish, it was gypsies, it was other people, but mainly Jewish. I knew one thing. I have an obligation to contribute something to society in order to prove to myself how come I'm alive when the others didn't have a life at all. I did not know that that would be talking about sex all day long. That was by chance. I became first a kindergarten teacher, then I became a public health worker at the Columbia University School of Public Health, and then I had the chance to become a sex therapist and do radio and so forth. But what drives me is this gratefulness that I'm alive, gratefulness that I can talk to Dennis and the East Hampton Library and promise you I'll be there next year. And that what is given to me, I will try to make the very best.
Sheila asks, did you have to train your husband or partner to be good lovers?
Next question, please. No personal question.
Okay.
But if I would have needed to, I could have.
There you go. Dr. Virginia Christ writes, I'm a sex therapist. Thank you. What do you do when one wants sex twice a day and the other wants it once a month?
Once a month, it's going to be a big problem. Except twice a day is also a problem. However, Virginia, listen carefully. Here's what I would tell them. Try to have sex when both of you want it. The rest of the time, don't be frustrated. Masturbate. If you don't know how to do it, read Sex for Dummies. It says specifically how to masturbate. But do it in privacy, not in front of the East Hampton Library. But do something if you are feeling sexually aroused because you saw a movie, or you read a book, or you read the book Sex for Dummies, or Heavenly Sex. Make sure you are in privacy and bring yourself to sexual satisfaction, knowing that this will be over in a period of time and then the two of you will have sex again. Also, you can ask your partner to bring you to orgasm without that partner necessarily being sexually aroused. That holds true for men and women. People are not Siamese twins. Somebody is sexually aroused, the partner can bring them to orgasm. You like that, Dennis?
That sounds good. Anne says, you've talked today about loneliness and about sex primarily related to young people. Can you talk about these issues as they relate to the over 70 population?
Okay, I did do a book, Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Sex Over 60. Sex over 60 applies also for over 70. And there are certain rules and regulations. For example, not to try to have sex in the evening, but to try to have sex in the morning. To wake up, get out of bed, go to the bathroom, have a little breakfast, back into bed. A man after a certain age needs physical stimulation in order to obtain and maintain the erection. And a woman after menopause needs to use a lubricant, not to engage in sex with a not well lubricated vagina, because then it's painful, and then she's going to say, it hurts, who needs it? So Dennis, get her the book, Sex Over 50. It gives good advice not to let it fall asleep, but to keep on and maybe masturbate each other or do something, knowing, not in the evening, Not when you're tired, but in the mornings.
Hmm.
One more?
We're waiting for another one. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
Of course. What a question. Number one, I want all of us to say thank you to the health workers. I listened every night at 7 with my son who is in Ottawa, Canada. We went on Zoom, or whatever that's called, and applauded the health workers. So I think we should applaud people like you, Dennis, people like Patti, who gives money to the East Hampton Library. I'm not asking how much. And then I want all of you to pray that I can go soon to Israel to get my honorary doctorate from Ben Gurion University. I wear the pin. There were already 2 dates that had to be changed. And I have a few in this country, but this is my first one in Israel. I'm very excited because I remember Ben Gurion's voice in 1948 when he declared the state of Israel. Too bad I've never met him. I would have loved to. He was a short man. I would have loved to meet him. And I'm waiting now to see when I can actually get that honorary doctorate. And then, Dennis, I'm going to call you and I'm going to send you a copy and a picture.
Great. And congratulations.
Thank you. This makes me jump for joy.
Dr. Virginia says thank you for all you've given us and for answering her question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Does any of our other guests have questions?
Okay, then put down next year in East Hampton, next year at Patti Kenner's dinner with 70 other people. I promise I'll bring a new book or a new film, something.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Let me open it back up to Patti Kenner. I'm going to unmute you. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
I can hear you.
Hi. Well, I just wanted to say out of Ruth's 46 books, at least we got to hear about 3 of them. Before this evening, I read Heavenly Sex, and it was so interesting. There are a lot of stories from the Bible in it, and as Dr. Ruth alluded, it's good for Christian people just as good as it is for Jewish people, because they're beautiful stories, biblical stories that allude to sex and loyalty and devotion and relationships. So you'll all enjoy Heavenly Sex. And then Dr. Ruth told us about Sex for Dummies, which all of us are dummies in some way. So I'm sure we can all learn something from Sex for Dummies. And then Rollercoaster Grandma, which I just love. It's, as Ruth said, it's a book that teaches about the Holocaust. It's part of a lot of curriculums at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where Ruth and I are trustees. It's part of the curriculum. And New York City school teachers look for teaching materials. They'll get Rollercoaster Grandma, where Ruth tells, part of the book tells about Ruth's life and her experiences, and the other, she goes to this country fair, as she said, with 2 of her grandchildren. So we're very lucky to have had Dr. Ruth this afternoon. I adore Dr. Ruth. She's just so creative and wonderful and inspirational. I guess that's the word, inspirational. And we thank her for coming, and we thank Dennis for interviewing her, and we thank all of you who attended. And Ruth, you should know this was a fundraiser. Everyone paid to hear you speak today.
I like that. And,
yes,
and Dennis is putting it.
You are well worth it. And we had people from California, from Park Avenue, from East Hampton, all over the country. They came to hear you. So we thank all of you for joining Authors Afternoon. Dennis?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis.